Hello, everybody, and welcome to another Twilight Zone review. Today it is Season 4, Episode 16. On Thursday, we leave for home, written by Rod Serling, and starring James Whitmore as William Benteen and Tim O'Connor as Colonel Sloan. And I have to say that this episode, in my opinion, is pretty much a masterpiece. It is one of the great Twilight Zone episodes, and certainly the best of the hour-long episodes, and I really feel that there's two reasons for this. I feel it is one of Rod Serling's very best scripts, and it features one of the all-time great television performances by James Whitmore as Benteen. And I will tell you the rest of my thoughts on this excellent episode as I go through it. So we find out that there's a colony, and we are introduced to Benteen and some other survivors. And we find out that they've been on this colony for about 3 decades or so, and the planet has 2 suns, and it's really hot. The conditions aren't that great. And you can tell that Benteen is really the man in charge. A man oversleeps, and he gets put on extra watch duty. And we learn in the opening narration that they are waiting for a rescue ship to come to hopefully get them off of this planet that they're on. So we also find out at this point, after the excellent setup, that a lot of the people are losing hope. A woman does herself in, and we find out that this is actually fairly common, that others have done the same. And then there's an argument. One of the men at the funeral says people have a right to do this. It's better than trying to live in these horrible conditions with no hope. And Benteen counters this with a speech talking about keeping order and rules. And if we don't do this, we will become like animals. So this guy seems to have it all together right now, but as we'll find out, that's not necessarily the case. You can definitely tell that he's in charge of this group, and he gets pretty much everybody in the group to believe that this ship is coming. They start chanting this, which will be very significant later. So right after that, we get a meteor shower, which is kind of interesting, and everybody's surviving, but you can tell they're really down about this latest incident. And there's a young boy there, and everyone else also seems to be pretty down, and they want the captain to tell a story about Earth. And I have to say that James Whitmore does a great job here. This story he tells is really sincere and great, and you can tell he genuinely misses it and would like to go back. At this point in the episode, this is also very significant, as we find out that they left with good intentions. They felt the Earth was okay, but they wanted to build a better place that didn't have things like war and prejudice. So the intention was good. They just didn't know what the conditions would be like. So they basically took a chance and have struggled. But you can tell that Benteen really inspires this group, and they survive partly because of him, which will also be significant later on. So then, soon after, a ship does come, and we're introduced to a Colonel Sloan, who is a very significant character as well, and he says he was on a mission, and his mission is to take the group back to Earth. So there's a lot of excitement. Of course, Benteen and the Colonel talk, and at first they get along for a few minutes, and we find out that on Thursday is the day they're going to leave. It's 3 days away, hence the title of the episode. And Benteen wants to know, like, if the Earth is the same. The captain says pretty much, more or less, we have the same good things, the same issues, things like that. But you can tell, and this is done very subtly and very well already, that the Colonel is kind of taking over things. People are kind of more interested in him because he's something new and a sign of hope than they are in Benteen. So then we go to another significant scene where some of the colonists start telling Benteen that the Colonel helped them with their injuries and things like that. And you can tell Benteen's upset because they're doing things a different way than what he's used to. And he's starting to feel very ignored little by little. So they go to a group meeting like the ones that they apparently always have. And instead of following Benteen's agenda and instructions, they're more interested in what the Colonel has to say, and they're asking him questions about the Earth. And once again, Benteen feels left out. They get to a conversation about baseball, and the Colonel says, I don't see why we can't play. So they start playing, but Benteen questions this at all. He says, I know what's best for my people, and this will hurt them health-wise. And the Colonel says it's not going to hurt anything. This little display of activity, and once again they basically clash. But it's interesting here that the Colonel does go along with what Benteen wants, and he has them stop playing. But then he also tells Benteen he has to relax, and Benteen calls them his people at one point, which is very significant. This is where you can see that this guy just can't let go of his power or the way things are. So there's one more day before the flight is going to take off now, and the Colonel and Benteen chat again, and the discussion comes up about when they go back to Earth, what will happen. And Benteen just assumes that everyone's going to stay together and that everybody will want to stay together. He says this is because they're like children, even the adults, and they don't know anything other than my leadership. So this is where we can really see the extent of Benteen's beliefs. The colonel, however, is not so sure that this will be everybody's wish, and he says you should mention it to them and they should vote on it. He's very skeptical of this. So they do have a group discussion, and Benteen tells the entire group what he wants to do, stay together, and it turns out that everybody really isn't into this. They really seem to want to go their own way. Benteen, though, insists that he's in charge and he wants everyone to stay together. However, this time when he tries to rally everyone and have them chant, it does not work. And he's not happy about this. He's actually crushed about this. Another great scene for James Whitmore. This guy looks generally upset about everybody going their separate ways. So Benteen, after the pleading doesn't work, he wants everyone to stay together. Him and the colonel talk again, and he tells the colonel, you brought us nothing but disappointment. I thought you were like a savior, but you've done nothing good except disrupt our great thing where we have no war or anything like that. And the colonel says, you have no issues because you're not individuals. You're just a group that does what one person says, which I think is a valid point. Although, to be fair to Benteen here, he did kind of help these people survive for 30 years. I get the feeling he did quite a bit more than they're even showing us in the hour format. But ultimately, the colonel, I feel, has, a valid point as well. And these are the kind of conflicts that make the episode great. So Benteen basically says, then we can't go back. We just can't go back at all. We have to stay here. So Benteen says, I'm going to tell everybody all the problems there are on the Earth, and then they'll want to stay. So when he does this, he's obviously trying to instill fear in them as a tactic to get them to stay. And the colonel steps in and admits the Earth isn't perfect. He says, but everyone there is their own master. You'll all be able to make your own decisions. You won't just have to listen to this guy. So ultimately they vote on this, and Benteen is outvoted. I'm not sure if everybody raised their hand, but most people did. So Benteen really goes nuts now, and he attacks the ship before he's basically tackled by the colonel. He's told to let it go, but he just can't. And he says he'll stay there even if he's all by himself. So after a scene where the colonel and another one of the men there wait for Benteen, they can't wait any longer, and everybody does leave, and he's alone. And this, I think, is one of the great scenes in all of Twilight Zone, where Benteen is by himself, and he starts giving a speech like he would at one of the meetings. He starts talking about the Earth again, a similar story to the one he gave when everyone was listening to him in the cave in the first half of the episode. But of course, he's now by himself, and when he sees the ship leave, he breaks down and realizes he did want to go back to Earth, but it's too late, and he's there all by himself. And we get a great closing shot of Benteen just standing there on his own, looking very small in the big landscape in front of him. It's a very riveting ending, and I was pretty blown away by it. I gotta be honest, it's a sad story for this guy who just couldn't adapt. He couldn't see what was in front of him until it was too late. So overall, I just feel this episode is done in a very outstanding way. Like I said, the performance of James Whitmore I feel to be one of Twilight Zone's best, and one of the best on TV in general, honestly. This guy is just great from beginning to end. Tim O'Connor is actually pretty solid too. I want to give him some credit. And Serling's script, although it brings up a lot of issues, is subtle enough. It doesn't bang you over the head, I don't feel. I feel it works just right. It has a good balance to it, and I think it's one of his best. And this episode brings up a lot of interesting, thought-provoking things, like what it means to really be a leader, and when is, it too much? When can you be too much? Is it really worth holding on to all your ideals, no matter what the cost? And, when is it time to maybe adapt to change, and when is it not? And however you feel about these issues, I think the episode does a good job of bringing up the discussion, which in my mind makes this a great episode. And I give On Thursday We Leave for Home a 5 out of 5. If there's only one season 4-hour-long episode you watch, I would recommend it to please be this one. So 5 out of 5 for On Thursday We Leave for Home. And as always, thank you very much for watching.